My name's Sean with Easy Street Billiards. Vic is off to the side.
Hello.
We're doing a live stream today, and the topic of conversation we're going to begin with is overthinking. So, I figure we just talk about it for a little while. I guess the thing that's best to do at the beginning is to try to define it and understand exactly what it is. So then you can, once you've identified exactly what the issue is, then you can develop a strategy to overcome it. So what I would say overthinking would be, paralysis by analysis, sort of, where any sort of thinking or where your awareness is more so than anything. I would say just like having your awareness on things that are not necessarily helping you solve the problem, which is in front of you, through, just unproductive thinking, or you're trying to decide between a lot of different options and you can't really figure out why you should be shooting one shot or another, and then your indecision is basically what you're trying to deal with when you're talking about overthinking. Like if you talk about underthinking for a brief moment, well, like underthinking would be like someone that just is operating basically with just pure instinct. It doesn't even consciously understand that a choice is being made. They're just operating on whatever impulse they've either learned through experiential behavior or whatever. And I would say overthinking is on the other side of that, where you have access to too much information and now you haven't figured out how to use that information to actually make a decision. You feel like you have too many options and now you don't know how to proceed. And from the other side, what would be known as maybe the flood of information, where you're drowning in all the potentials and you don't really know how to select from all the things that you see. And once you can see that you have this issue, now it kind of can become a beast, because then you can start to overthink the actual problem itself. Why am I having difficulty with clarity of thought? So I think that's pretty obvious that that's what overthinking is just like extra, mental grinding that's not really helping you, and then, or makes you feel emotional, or maybe you're already emotional in a way that caused you to second guess yourself and all that, and then it can lead to a trust issue in your own game, in your thought processes, and then in your and it just expresses itself in a lot of different ways. So I would say the best thing that I've found to address overthinking is to adopt a strategy of underthinking, so to speak, where if you consider yourself not an intelligent person, and that not that not intelligent, I wouldn't say is the right way, but say that you're not an overthinker, and that you'd be more on the scale of someone that is they just make a decision based on whatever criteria they may or may not even understand that they're using to base what they do. Some of it could be just based off of the emotion they're feeling at the time. Some of it could be based off of listening to people that they trust for whatever reason, even if maybe that trust is unwarranted. That's a whole other conversation. But if you rely on the experts, so to speak, then to kind of lead you, you can get by without really doing much thought. And I think that each person has to decide how many of their own problems they want to solve through making decisions on the fly about everything that comes up in your life, and then how many of your problems you want to solve by just Googling the standard solution for all generic people and then deciding, am I in this situation a generic, like general population, like one size fits all situation? Because that's part of where you got to understand is like, okay, well, is this like a situation where I have, many different shots to shoot from and they're all easy shots, and now I'm just struggling with like, I don't know, like what's the pro pattern, or is it like I'm faced with like two difficult situations, and I don't know if I can execute either of them properly, and now I'm trying to decide between them. There are two different situations that you can both overthink. It can be too easy, and that can cause you to second guess yourself and not trust that it's actually that easy, that you could just do pretty much whatever you want, and you can use your ability, trust in your ability to overcome any of the little stuff that can come up, and that you only have to really prevent yourself from slipping and falling on a banana peel. And and then if that's your, people, if that's the way that you fail, if that's because everyone kind of has different ways that they tend to gravitate towards their like normal behaviors, and that causes them to kind of have limited strength in depending on your style of living and your style of existing. So you kind of have to understand that. So I personally am in the camp of like, now that I've been around for a long time and I've been a student of the game for a long time, I feel like I'm in the camp of people that have quite a bit of knowledge to pull from, and that the difficult part becomes what move or what shot should I shoot among the different nuanced shots that I can choose from. It's like on this 1 to the 2 situation, for instance, it's slightly off angle, meaning that the cue ball is going to come to this rail, and the distance of it makes it to where, okay, well, if you're going to shoot to try to run this rack out with a 9 ball, where do I want to be for the 2 so I can get out on this 3 ball, because the 4 is kind of in a spot. So ideally, you're either going to probably be in this window here, shooting it there, or this window here, shooting it into this pocket as well, so that you can come around from the 4 or come this way, whatever. So the decision is okay, what am I more confident with? Can I hit this and maybe play a draw and then come over here to leave an angle so that I can come forward and maybe choke through here? Or if I get really straight, then I can just roll up and use this rail to enter this space where I can shoot this ball. Or do I have to punch it all the way out and try to end up like relatively straight on it? Because if I get straight on it, I can roll up to this spot. If I angle slightly over here, then I can punch over to this spot to shoot it. Or if I get on this side here, I can roll to this area here and then play it from there. So then, by playing almost as straight on the 2, you have, a decent leeway of like all this foot area here is legit, to like play shape off of. So then, you just decide, okay, well, which one of those shots is like, requires less precision. That's the one I would normally shoot. And then I would just be as precise as I could be in that scenario. Because it's kind of like over time, if you take your, an analysis, if you do an analysis of how good you are at certain shots, you know what you're good at and what you're not good at. And you just try to stick as much as you can in situations where you need to execute to the things that you're good at. And those are going to be the things that you naturally do without thinking about too hard. Your natural instincts are going to be to shoot certain types of shots. The hard part is that when your natural instincts are causing you to fail and you're not training your instincts. So that's kind of what I do to combat the overthinking is on that last, this situation here, there's no clear answer to what I should do. I could do either shot. To me, I think that just shooting it straight in and then punching out is slightly easier, but then the hard part is that I'm leaving myself really a worse shot from the 2 to the 3. So I still haven't won anything by even shooting this shot perfectly, either choice that I make. And I know that, so to me, it doesn't even really matter what you do. the thing is that if you have goals set up beforehand for how your style of play is going to evolve in this match or in this situation, because you elected to decide to play in a competition first of all, so then you should have goals in that, and part of those goals should help you make decisions while you're playing. If you're battling with overthinking, then it's like, well, what situation is that you're overthinking? Are you having trouble deciding whether or not you're going to play offensively or defensively? That's a normal overthinking situation. Should I play safe? Should I take the hard safe or the hard shot? That's like a normal one. And the answer to that shouldn't be decided upon at that moment, because now you're relying kind of on the way you feel to make a decision for you. And I think really it's what I try to do to address the overthinking is try to do all the thinking beforehand, and now I'm just operating off of like a rule set of like, okay, well, in these types of situations, when these types of decisions come up, I'm going to prioritize one or the other, because I'm trying to improve my decision making with that type of situation and hone it to one side or the other. Where, because this shot here, you don't even have to go for it. There's tons of stuff you could do to get better control. This shot's missable, first of all. You don't just always make it. So, if you're not feeling good, you can understand that, and then you can play another shot. And not that you would never play safe here, because I think really one of your goals should be able to shoot this shot and make it and get shape. So realistically, unless you're like prioritizing, playing defense and like looking for places to play safe and then shooting those shots as kind of like part of what you're trying to work on, then you can play safe in this situation. But I think ordinarily, you should be like, okay, I'm going to try to play offensively as strongly as I can, and what I try to do is safety, but I try to focus on having a mindset that I'm trying to take care of myself, so I have to pay attention to the pitfalls that are potentially going to be there, so that when I see them, then I can choose the appropriate strategy, and they don't come at me so quick where I wasn't aware that it was going to happen when I got to the situation. I can see before I get to the situation what's tricky. Like when I was explaining what I'm going to do on the 1 to the 2, in order to even really have that conversation, I have to have a conversation about what I'm going to do from the 2 to the 3 based on potential spots. So we're talking about like down the road thinking the whole time. The down the road thinking is what helps you decide what you're supposed to do right now. It's like, well, what kind of shot do I really want on the 3? Do I want to play, to this window and then play over here and all that? And then if you just take a second to look at the 2 different scenarios, it's pretty easy to see that, to me, playing the 3 in this corner is way better, because there's more of a window here, first of all, and the 4 is laying up to go into either of these side pockets or either of these 2 corner pockets. You could potentially bump the 5, and then that makes the 4 straight in, even if you didn't get in there, So to me, that's really good, because if you're over here, now you got to go over here. Now the 9 is there. You could hit the side of the 4 or the side of the 6 if you get too straight on it, and then roll over and scratch. There's all kinds of stuff that you don't want to necessarily deal with. Not to say that you can't shoot that shot, but I think that if you plan ahead, this is not the shot you plan for when you have the option. But then what you're faced with now is a percentage deal where maybe it's tougher to draw and punch and get to a spot where you can get over here. I mean, can be a difficult shot for some people that don't have a stroke, so you got to develop a knowledge of your own game, and that helps you not overthink. You're like, I'm not going to go out of my way to shoot a shot that I'm not comfortable with, but in order to do that, you have to go out of your way to find a shot that you're comfortable with also. So, having a value of like, when I'm playing, I want to me, I think it's hard to say what should I do. It's more about like, I think with playing pool, what I try to do is just shoot the most obvious, reasonable, easy shot. there's no like reason to like try to science your way into like why one shot is better than the other. I think that once you have a reasonably robust, balance of offensive skill, you mean you can stroke the ball pretty well, and that you can play reasonable position. Your ball pocketing is standard. You have a sort of relatively balanced game. Then then at that point, you can use that ability to basically negate any small percentage changes in like how difficult a shot is. You got to assume you can do most of it that you're planning for. So then what you're gonna do is like for me, my goal then is like, okay, so as long as I'm playing reasonable shots, now I'm going to identify situations where the shot itself is the reasonable shot is difficult, and maybe that causes me to have something to like look at practicing later, where either it's like a stroke that I'm not quite comfortable with because I have to use more finesse or more power that I'm comfortable with based on the cueing, for instance, because some shots are like, well, it's not that difficult. Maybe when your hand is on the cloth and you get your nice perfectly closed bridge, or you can do open bridge, or what, you have the options of anything you want to do versus, maybe I'm cueing over a ball and now I'm elevated, and I'm open bridging higher. I can't quite see because my head is more like facing down to like make sure that I'm over the shaft. Like it's harder to see up. You can get more head movement and stuff like that. That makes the shot more difficult, and that's something that needs to be practiced because that's part of the game of pool. Is not just shooting the shot with perfectly your hand on the cloth. If your hand's on the cloth, that's like the easiest version of the game. This is the thing that everyone practices to be able to just sit there and just be able to shoot every shot like with your hand on the cloth. That's the best way. That's where you want to be. That's like pro level pool. Is you never shoot a shot except for with your hand on the cloth, because everything is like normal. You can address it properly. You're not stretched out as much, all that stuff, But then most of the time, you're like leaning, you're like bridging on the side rail, or you got over a ball, or you're like your hand can't be where it wants to be for the bridge that you want to use that you normally use. So then now you have to like shorten your bridge, lengthen your bridge, and these are two different shots. So it's like if you can't do that kind of thing and adapt, then that's sort of the practice, is learning how to like use, like I'm pretty short for a 9-foot table. I can't reach as far as most people, so I've kind of like evolved to using a longer bridge all the time so that I don't have to adapt as much to having a shorter bridge most of the time. And then every time I'm over a ball, I have to elevate. Maybe I wanted to bridge here for a shot. Now I have to bridge here, or I could just bridge up here, and now I have to use a really short bridge. So I've just decided, because I'm normally further away, because I'm a little bit shorter, I can't reach out. I'm just going to play more down here all the time. And that's what I've chosen to do, So, and that's an adaptation. And as you play pool, identifying those little adaptations, and working on those is how you're going to get a lot better, because the game itself is not so tough when you can just queue up level all the time, and you have like the angles are good and all that stuff. It's more of the adaptations, and by like realizing that, adding that to your like critical thinking about how you approach your thinking process for the game, and help you not overthink as much. Because then you'll be like, oh, I'm like always going to be trying to find the easy shot. That's what I always try to do, is just look for the easiest shot that gets me the win. I'm not trying to overcomplicate things, but it takes a little bit of doing to figure out what's actually that shot. And partly is you just have to be like, okay, well, I don't know what the best shot is. The thing that I'm here to do is shoot my shot, and then now, after shooting it, I will discover if that was a good shot or not, or if that was the right shot for me, or, because now you've actually done the repetition, and now there's information that you can acquire. So in one sense, the overthinking is like, well, it can happen from an emotional sense where you're afraid to fail, and that's what's making it hard to make a decision. And that's a valid thing. And I think that if you decide, instead of ever having that situation unfold where I feel like I'm going to fail, is realizing obviously that failure is just part of the game, and that by overcoming our failures, that's how we get stronger and grow. So ultimately, it's not so much about failing that we should concern ourselves with. We should concern ourselves with growth from failure. If we grow from the failure, then it's actually not really failing. That's just the process of improvement in a nutshell. And that if we have a consequence on ourselves that if we fail, that's a bad thing, then now, even though that's the path to growth, we're put ourselves in a catch-22 where we can't make ourselves happy. That's where overthinking can come from some of the time. And I would say that if you decide that every time you miss the ball, that you're going to catalog it in the back of your head, and that when you start realizing that certain shots are missed and certain positions I don't get because I'm hitting it wrong and I don't see that my goal is to be able to be more aware of what I'm doing, where my little things are happening that I could improve, and that through those failures, I'm going to be able to, you know, accumulate more different avenues for improvement through, like, okay, well, I keep missing this, shot where maybe this is a common one, right? Where you're playing, you want to make this ball, but you got to play back and forth, so it's not like you don't want to go forward down table, and if you draw, then you can get into the 8. So you really, if you want to just go back and forth, it's a little bit of a tricky shot because it's like kind of like a draw shot, but you need to hit it like with the stun, because if you draw it actually, then that's not the shot. You need it to stun, so it takes a little bit of doing, because most people will line up the shot and play it with right and hot right English, which makes the ball pocketing seemingly easier to me. I think maybe it's not easier, and I just know the shot better. But that, or using like a stun, like a drag stroke to punch it across and end up in the middle of the table. That shot is a lot of people's nightmare. Where and if you just spend time realizing, okay, these are the kinds of shots that I should be practicing, and then once I can do them, then now when they come up, then it will be the right shot. It's a lot of times the obvious shot is actually the right shot to shoot. The problem is if you're not good at shooting that shot, now you're going to be in a situation where you have a room for growth. And then, if you can choose to shoot that shot knowing that you're working on it, and then now even if you miss it, it's not a problem. You don't fail, because now you'd be like, well, I knew that this is something that I'm working on, because I can identify it as a weakness. Now that you've identified it as a weakness, it's not so much that you have to like focus on that thing to like make it better at that moment. You just got to be like, okay, what I need to do, because I fail in this shot quite often, is see what I'm doing that's different than I want to do, and then now I will just remember that for next time, and then we'll get better at that shot over time without even really actively trying to get better at it, just by identifying that that's your weak point, and then knowing that you're like, okay, if I really put my awareness on where the cue ball touches this ball and what spin I was putting on my cueing here, then I can identify exactly what I did, and that's going to be a little bit different probably than the ideal situation that you're trying for, and then you can kind of like backtrack the physics, so to speak, to figure out where your cueing needed to be that it wasn't. And then you just set it up and hit it several more times until you get better at it. And then you'll see that it doesn't take that long to get better at one shot once you're really paying attention to what you're doing, and it's hard some of the time to emotionally separate yourself when you're in a competitive situation where, like, oh, this is something that, I'm a little bit struggling with, and I'm not so good at it. But then we're here in a tournament match, and here is the shot. And I'm like, well, this is where if you were prepared and then practiced that shot, you wouldn't be in problem. And that's kind of the thing about pool that's tough, is that it's a recreational activity. We don't have all day to practice all these little shots, so we're going to have some of the struggles of that. And, we do our best to, and that's why, as far as the overthinking goes, is like, well, if you're overthinking what you're doing, what you're, what I should practice with, because I think overthinking is generally, prevalent a lot more than just at the moment that it happens in a match, but also other questions can be answered, and I'd say that, well, the easy thing is every time you miss a ball, you just write down what the shot was, and then the next time you practice, you just work on the one that was the shot that you missed the most often, because then that should be the one that's going to help you get the more wins. And I think that most people play this game partly to win, but also if you balance your game, then you're just going to be more successful more often. Even if the players you're playing against play better, you're still going to play better, and ultimately that's what matters. If you can compete against the best players around, even if you're not beating them but all the time, but you're doing well against them and that you're confident against them, and that you're confident with your own strategy, I think that's a testament that you're not overthinking. So that should be one of the goals. Is well, what do I need to learn to overcome this problem of not knowing how to decide what to do? So what's another good thing to work on for overthinking? I would say having a really detail-oriented system for playing, can help you too. It's like when we'll take this shot and not worry about it so much, but one thing that you can do is just try to simplify how you decide what shot you're going to play, by deciding, okay, well, say that the 2 there is probably not a great example of a simple situation, but this is good here. So from the 1 to the 2, the way that I would play my pattern is think, okay, well, if I played a stun shot, so I'm using the exact tangent line, the cue ball would make the 1 in the corner and then play here, and then with no spin on it, it'll just come back at this line. And I would just look at that first. It's well, what does the actual tangent line tell me if it travels in space off this rail and continues on? Does that carry me conveniently to the next location that I want to be? And if it does, then most of the time I'll just go for that. And then ideally, you could even just not even use that stun line, but just roll it naturally, I think, where you just rolling ball. Say, instead of here, now your 2 ball is like this, right? Now, you wouldn't even draw the ball because you just let the cue ball roll, which is what it wants to do. Yeah, so I think it's best, from your overthinking standpoint, if you can roll the ball and not roll it, meaning just hit it soft, but make it spin natural roll, rolling like this. It doesn't matter how fast it's going, meaning that it's not sliding or turning, it's just rolling. If you can just roll the ball, it's going to be a more easily understood reaction because it happens way more often than any other type of hit. So by learning how to roll the ball and make it, now you're learning that, and then that should be the beginning of playing position, should be learning how to just roll the ball by hitting it harder and softer and making it roll faster or slower, and then understanding that that's going to take you to places on the table, and then you just use that rollingness to be your first primary way that you play shape. But then once you evolve and you develop your draw stroke, now you're going to be able to use the tangent line more often. If you're rolling the ball, you're going to hit here, the cue ball's going to come off, and it's going to roll forward. The tangent line here, it's going to roll forward, right? So once you learn how to draw the ball, now instead of always hitting here or down further, you're going to actually learn how to hit the side rail further and further up the table with control, and then now you can add that in to your position play from there. But I would say rolling ball is always first, but then once you have the ability to play draw shots, now you add high and low, above center, below center, more below center obviously for this, because above center is for follow, but that's just an extension of rolling, is to force it forward, and that is an evolution in then learning the draw. So I kind of prioritize rolling ball shots as the easiest shots to just be consistent with, that you just kind of let it go and do what it wants to do. You're not forcing the cue ball to have spin and speed on it at the time that contact with the object ball, which is a more complicated interaction. So then I add high and low from this kind of just hitting center, and then once, if I can't get position where I want to with those things, then I start adding more right and left English, and that's going to be what I would say that you should start out with. And then as you're like, we'll start warming up, then I think it's like, for me, I like to put a little bit of spin on most shots just to assist me getting more precise position. And that's part of what makes the game interesting for me, is kind of like knowing how to play the simple shot, and knowing that from that simple shot I can make minute adjustments and get even better position than I would with just using that like center ball. Maybe center ball with a touch of right or a touch low could adjust the position just a hair and make it even better. And that's what I need to do. And that's part of like what helps me know, is because I know that I'm working on that. So then I'm going to shoot it in such a way to make that happen. And that reduces my own overthinking, where I'm not, working on decision making, because I already know what kind of shots I'm trying to work on, and like what my thought process is going to be, going into it. And then that helps you just know what to do, and then the overthinking for me comes up, and I think this is for most people, is when they're like, you've reached kind of like the barrier of your skill, and now you don't know how to proceed and what the next thing to do is. You're in unfamiliar territory. As you improve, you're constantly going to be faced with new situations that you've never been in, and they'll keep repeating until you understand exactly what you need to do to move forward with that. So for me, the overthinking happens at those stages, and I think that's a lot of people, where you like, once you understand, oh, this is what my technique needs to be to overcome this, or this is what it feels like to be in this situation, and then now I'm like used to it, then I can move forward, because I can be more conscious about what I'm doing. So for me, like being in rare situations is the time when I might be overthinking. But like I said, as I gotten a little bit older, once you realize that you're going to learn from every experience no matter what, then the overthinking really does go away quite a bit. Because if you start seeing that you're overthinking, then that means mostly that you've forgotten what your priorities are, more so than anything. And now all you have to do is just go back to wherever they're written down in your head, and then just go down the list. And then now you're like, okay, I told myself I was going to do these things. So then now that, and I told myself it was likely going to happen eventually, that I was going to be overthinking. And at that moment, my goal was to recognize that I'm overthinking, and that, recognize that it's just a natural thing for everybody. And that, one thing that you can say to yourself is like, it's the first like thought that you have that takes you away from what your focus is not really your fault. Once you get locked into the repeating of that, where it goes beyond what's necessary, then that starts to become like, okay, well, now my growth really is in realizing sooner that I'm starting to overthink things, because I'm feeling the pressure. And that now I think that the overthinking in that situation, a lot of it comes from not having a plan for the situation as it has been, because you haven't gotten there before, and that you're trying to understand, how can I move forward? And it's just going to be like, well, my goal is to just hone my instincts. What I want to be able to do on any shot is just stand there and then be like, I don't care necessarily what happens, because I'm paying attention. If I hit and my arm goes off to the side, I'll notice that, and then I'll deconstruct it and figure out why. So because of that, as long as I'm emotionally solid and having an objective viewpoint, it's impossible to overthink. So the priority for me is more just comes from like if I start feeling like I'm emotionally compromised, maybe I'm going on tilt a little bit, I'm paying too much attention to things that I have no control over, and I'm not paying attention to the things that I can use to benefit me when it's my opportunity, then now my goal is just going to be to come back to that place. And then now there's no like even real thinking involved, because like I said, it's like once you've established a really nice system, really there's like no moment where you don't have something that you should be designated as like, this is what my awareness should be on at this moment in time when this situation happens. Because I mean, pool is it's a repeating cycle game. It's like you shoot a shot, then you shoot another shot, and then if you establish a value system where you don't have to decide what to do on every shot because your value system tells you what to do, now you're just following instructions the whole time. And partly it's like, well, now it's just pattern recognition. We're like, well, when the pattern is like this, I always pretty much do this. However, with that being said, is like you got to look more deeply into that pattern over time so you can recognize that it's not just like two different patterns. It's like a flow that you get used to how the balls are shifting, and now at some point, now it's a better shot to shoot a different type of shot because the ball is kind of moved away from the zone that it's in and kind of shifted to a new zone in relation to the way that other balls are sitting. And that's just through experience of just being like, okay, what are the easy shots for me to get position on, and what places can I get to easily on the table without having to worry about scratching and whatnot. And that's just an accumulation of knowledge. And if you're always at minimum when you shoot every shot, you're like, okay, well, in rotation, this can help you with overthinking as well. In rotation, my number one value most of the time is running this ball into this hole, right? So if I'd be like, okay, well, at minimum, I'm going to tell myself I'm going to make the one. That reduces like you're not going to miss it as often if you tell yourself, I'm going to prioritize pocketing this ball. So for me, when I say, okay, my number one value here is to make the one, then that means that I am going to put the cue ball to the spot where it needs to go to make that contact where the ball will enter the hole so that it enters the hole, right? And that's the thing that I'm going to make sure I do first. So I'm going to look over here, see it go. Now, from there, now that I've established that this is the spot that I want to hit, now I can decide, okay, well, what's next? I got to move the cue ball to a spot so that I can run out. So, wherever it needs to be, we'll just pick like right here, because it's, maybe the middle of the table. That's a nice spot to end up. It's pretty easy to get to the middle of the table, and as long as you're close to it, you're pretty much in the same zone. So, so then I'm going to play my position here, and now there's no more thinking that needs to happen. Now that you've decided what to do, because this is what you're going to do. It's like why you did it isn't really relevant after you've done it. Now you can let that go while you're doing what you're doing, and now you have another focus here. Now the focus is understanding, okay, well, what spin and speed and cueing do I need to use here when I strike the cue ball to make it go, hit here, make that ball, and come off this rail at this spot? What would it look like? What would it feel like? What aim line do I need? What cueing so that the spin, etc., makes it do exact thing that I want? That's all, it's been determined by the friction of the cloth, the air temperature, all the stuff, the energy of the balls. Now the question, the answer is, can I replicate that exact physics to make that thing happen? And all that stuff is like not any thinking, it's just doing and repetitions. It's like once you know what to do, like, okay, well, how many times is it going to take, for you to get down on the ball, and then get to the middle of the table if you just line it back up? I mean, that's pretty close right there, right? So, I wouldn't necessarily say I need to practice this shot any more than that, but if you don't get there, then you just shoot the same shot again. I don't remember exactly where it was, the cue ball, but it's say the same shot, There's an exact physics that make it go to that place, and then so there's no question. I think a lot of you can overthink things so much of being like, well, if you don't know what your actual thinking wants to be, and by like deciding beforehand in these situations, I'm going to prioritize certain things, like, uh, from the three being here versus over here. Well, one of the things that I prioritized was like, well, I could catch a weird reaction off the 6 and scratch or get hooked behind the 9, and that makes it way less percentage, even though that's maybe a remote possibility, versus being on this side of the ball, and now there's very little possibility for me to scratch or get hooked on the 4. So that makes it just way, it's just like easier in my mind because there's less risk. Now it's more about ball pocketing and less about position play. Any like nuanced position play you need to achieve normally makes it a little bit more difficult to pocket the ball, and then so you get a feel for your own level of ability to execute, like, finesse position or finesse, like, accurate ball pocketing shots. Like, say you're really far away, now it's a tougher shot to make, and it's just more difficult to play your cue ball control after that because you have to bear down more, and your like percentage of awareness on ball pocketing versus cueing, it might not be up to snuff to be able to just get both as dialed in as you want, and you just have to be like, well, what's the most important thing? In a 9 ball, generally speaking, making the ball is the most important thing. Your decision making should carry you through having to play precise position most of the time, in my opinion. And that's just kind of the goal to strive for, is to just make reasonable decisions and then execute well. I don't think that they have to go further than that, as far as being able to do anything magical all the time. Part of the magic is just making it to where you're not have to do anything crazy, and then once in a while, you do have to do what you have to do, but that's part of the fun of it too, is realizing that it's like, well, you only really have to overthink it if you're like decided that it's not going to be fun no matter what. It's like, you don't have to think at all, and you can play the game and enjoy it just as much as someone that thinks the whole time and is trying to like be the best, absolute best player of the game, and they're willing to do the work and all that stuff. And that doesn't even guarantee necessarily that they're going to improve as much as the person that's just there to have a good time. That's what's fascinating about it, is that you just have to find your own way to improve, and that overthinking is kind of like, well, if you just pay attention to what's going on, you forgive yourself for what you did, and then it's like it's just a learning thing. It's like going to school, and then it's not about feeling negative emotions based off the result of shots. As long as you witnessed it and you saw what happened, and not just that, but just witnessing your own reaction. I think part of the game of pool is learning how to react the way that you really want to react, the way that your best self reacts to every shot. And it's hard to understand, like, what is that really? When you're playing, if your value is to win, or to enjoy the balls running around and stuff, then it's not so important that you're even good at it. Or if it is to win, but that's a whole other thing. But if you just like, hitting the balls around and playing the social thing, you're winning just by playing with somebody and having a good time, and then other people maybe want to get deeper into it. But you got to learn your own way, because I think that if you learn what you really like to do, you can still continue to get better and better at it over time. But you gotta like really hone in what you want to get out of the game and how you want to respond, because that's really what matters at the end of the day. If you think you're overthinking, like, well, overthinking, so much of it doesn't even have to happen. It's more about like, well, the better you know yourself, the less overthinking you're going to have, because it's like, I've just started realizing for myself, it doesn't even really matter what shot I shoot. I'm gonna do my best on every shot. In fact, if I leave myself a little bit tough, it's just, yeah, I mean, it can be, you could say that it's disappointing, but the crazy, like, sweet shots that you hit are always in those tough positions. Most people would not applaud me making this 2 ball right now, But if I had to jump the 4 and make the 6 ball, and I did that, that would be an exceptional shot. The thing is that I don't want to be doing that in a pressure situation. So, not to say that those are the highlight reel shots. That you got to decide. It's like, well, there's going to be plenty of both in my career. I just have to just play them both kind of the same, knowing that they're just like, yeah, one is more rare than the other, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to happen many, many times in my life, and that I can enjoy, ideally, the monotony of the easy shots as much or more than the highlight reel shots as well, and that and it's kind of like you're systematizing the game a little bit, which some people maybe think, oh, that takes some of the fun out of it. Like, yeah, you could say that, but that more comes from the viewpoint of someone that is comfortable being where they're at, and that I think that for me, being growth oriented, it's like I wouldn't enjoy something if I wasn't able to get better at it, and I was forced to just stay the same. So by like trying different things and trying to grow, and thus like embracing that failure as just part of the game inherently, and that by missing shots, it just gives you a reason to show up the next day and get back in there and not miss that ball and actually start making it and start getting out in those situations and learn why is it that I keep getting to this situation that I don't know what to do, and that what do I need to start adding to or taking away from what I'm already doing to allow me to move forward, and that it's not so much about the situation that you're actually facing. A lot of it, I think, has to do with not having a clear philosophy for what you're doing when you're playing the game. Why you're playing it so much. It's fun, but there's more than just the balls moving around that's fun about it. And that if you can identify, oh, I really like this part of it, then that can help you make decisions here. Because this part of it, a lot of the times, is like, well, do I like drawing the ball, following the ball, banking the ball, hitting it harder, softer, all that stuff. It's all built into how you play the game, and that's all that's your decision making, and if you can't decide who you are, then now you are going to overthink, and to say that you're committed to one style or another is kind of funny to me. It's not really about that. It's just that at the moment that you're there, you shoot the shot that's there. I don't know why anyone would do anything else. You can't create something that's not there, and there should be one obvious shot mostly if you're if you're connected to yourself a little bit, So to me, a little bit knowledge of self helps you not overthink, right? So I do like to think about what my style is quite often, and what my values are. It's for me, I like to shoot simple, efficient, using the minimum amount of energy of my own body as possible as part of the kind of the artistry of the game, where I'm trying to get the most energy, the most value that I can out of every shot that I can shoot, and that's how I stay interested. And other people are not the same way, so I can't tell people how to proceed so much in that way, other than to say that if you allow the game to be infinitely deep, by continuing to explore what you're capable of and what you enjoy doing, it's hard to overthink because you're just going to learn from every situation. Now it's about it's just how quickly can I make a clear decision is the challenge, where I know that I'm going to make, there's the obvious shot should be there. If you're playing rotation, the obvious shot here is to make the 2, and roll to a spot where you can get on the 3. Now, exactly how you go about doing that, is just going to be up to you, right? But that's the thing, is you'll know what you're good at, and if you're not good at it and you're shooting it, then that's fine too, because now you can learn from it. So partly, you don't always just shoot the things that you're good at. Today, you could be like, oh, well, I'm going to shoot shots that I'm not good at a little bit, because it's, we're practicing, and I'm not playing in a serious match. but I'm aware of that, so I'm not gonna like feel bad if I don't run out every time, because I know that that's actually not my best, like my highest percentage control, highest percentage win rate game. What it is it's a developing skill game version where you're practicing, and part of that practice is like evolving your technique, and that part of the technique is realizing that you don't, if you're prioritizing winning when you're practicing, then you're not learning your technique properly, because you're thinking more about getting a result than you are about achieving a technique, which isn't a result oriented thing, you know. 5 minutes. So I feel like we could talk forever about overthinking, because it's like one of those things. So I think just to sum it up, once you feel like you're in an overthinking situation, the first question to ask yourself is, how do I want to feel at the end of this shot? And then once you can decide, okay, I want to feel good about what I did, then now I'd be like, well, what kind of shot would I have to shoot to feel good about what I'm doing? And a lot of that has to do with the questions that you answer beforehand, because you know that some of the time you're going to miss no matter what. It's just, that's how it's done. You do not know that you're going to make certain shots every single time, and if you're in an overthinking situation, you're definitely in one of those situations. So accepting that you're going to fail maybe a lot of the time in certain situations before you shoot it will then allow you to feel better about what you do, because now you're going to be like, okay, well, no matter what, I'm going to be okay with what happens. Make it or don't make it, succeed or fail, because I'm seeing that that's what I'm doing, and now I'm making a choice to not care about what I don't have control over, which is obviously the situation completely. You have some control. You have control of your emotions if you've come to this point. And once you've done that, now that's half the battle. Like once you've learned how to control your emotions, now you can have some a little bit more consistency with your thought process, and then you can develop a little bit more habit. And that's part of it, whereas that's the primary thing, is witnessing that you're actually overthinking is the bridge that you have to cross to actually stop overthinking. Once you see that you're doing it, you're just like, oh, this is just a trap, an ego trap. The ego is trying to get me to make a bad decision here, and that's because I'm not realizing there's no bad decisions that can be made here. It only matters how I feel at the end of the shot, because if you're a lifetime pool player, then you're not quitting, because if you make this ball, you're not quitting. If you miss the ball, you're not quitting. So it really doesn't matter what happens. More, what's important is how you emotionally feel in your daily life. So if I want to feel good, then I have to shoot shots to make me feel good. And that doesn't mean that I have to make them. It just has to mean that I'm getting value out of it, using the metrics of value for myself. And each person has to go and do that investigative work on what is important about this shot that's going to make me feel good about shooting it no matter what happens. And I think that if you can get to that level, then you're pretty good. But like I said at the beginning, it's witnessing you're doing it, develop a technique to, get your breathing or whatever, calm yourself down, reframe in your mind what's happening as a growth opportunity. And this is why we signed up and all this stuff, because competition brings out the best and the worst in people, and that's what makes it fascinating. Is that the game itself is a lot easier, it seems like, when there's no pressure. But then when you start competing, all of a sudden there's pressure, but there doesn't have to be. We decided to put that on ourselves. The other person might not be feeling any differently than just practicing against you, and you might be feeling all the heat in the world, and that's just an illusion. It's just you feeling some sort of way and they are not, and as soon as you can realize that you don't have to feel that way, then all these situations will get way more manageable. And a lot of that has to do with, again, you got to decide who you're going to be afterwards before you even shoot the shot. So I think that's going to be it for today. Appreciate you all. If you have an interest in contributing to content, then get on the school.com group. There's a link pinned. Support us if any way possible. Just a like and a subscribe would be awesome. If you got value out of the video, you could share it. That would be sweet. We are just trying to grow the brand and trying to help people with their pool game. And the more awareness we can get to that, the better off we're all going to be. I can probably talk about everything forever, so all you got to do is ask a question, and I'll talk about it maybe for an hour straight. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Love you all.